I'm just going to be very brief and say we would now like to welcome the Community Voice in Arts and Culture panel to the stage, chaired by Patrick Fox. I'm going to leave Patrick to do the introductions. And Patrick, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. There's a little round of applause there. Go on. Lean into it. Keep the energy up. It's just about afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session focusing on all things collaboration, engagement and community decision making. As Rebecca said, my name is Patrick. I work at Heart of Glass. I'm going to be chairing this session. Just a reminder that the Mentimeter is the device to add questions in, so I'll be checking my phone later on. It's not because I'm bored or being rude, it's because I'm trying to surface out some of your questions. But we've got a really brilliant group of panellists for us today. Again, full biographies are in the pack, but we're joined by Sara Wajid from Birmingham Museums talking about their citizen jury work. Give a little wave there. And we've got Grace Bauer from Rotherham talking about how young people's voice has been central to the delivery of the new Children's Capital of Culture. We've got Sophie Eustace from Creative Playground in Crawley. We're talking about their community decision-making processes. And then Saad, Eddine, Saad from New Art Exchange who'll be sharing some of their thoughts and drawing on their experience of this theme and topic. So we'll be hearing from each guest shortly, but I just wanted to set the scene really and introduce a little bit about the work of Heart of Glass. So we've been supporting artists and communities for over a decade now as part of Arts Council's Creative People and Places programme and also MPO programme, working from primarily Knowsley and St Helens in the northwest. And I would hasten to guess that our work, like many in the room, takes place in a lot of different social and community settings. And it requires time, trust, and deep thinking about the conditions needed for real and meaningful exchange, ensuring that diverse voices aren't just heard, but actively shaping what's made and shared. For me personally, this isn't just a theoretical situation. I grew up in a working class neighbourhood in North Dublin in what was at one time one of the largest regeneration programmes in Europe. And my first art experience wasn't in a gallery or in a theatre or even in a library space. It was in a community centre. That's where I first understood that art could be a space to imagine the world differently, and indeed was a space that I could be in. And as we hear from today's speakers, we'll explore different approaches to community decision-making and the sharing of power. And I think, as we'll hear over the course of the presentations, that there's not a one-size-fits-all model here. Community-based, co-created, socially engaged art, whatever the descriptor that you use, it can take many forms and can be shaped by communities of place, communities of interest, communities of intent, communities of association. There's a myriad of different practices here, and we're going to get to deep dive into some different approaches here. At Heart of Glass, we really settled on community arts as a descriptor really for the work that we do, because the work is powered by communities, whether that be a group of scientists, people who live on a street, pigeon fanciers, or pigeon fancying scientists who live on the same street. I think what's really important to state here is that we're all part of many and very different communities. And when we first started at Heart of Glass, we were based at St Helens Rugby League Football Club. And one of the big takeaways I got from our time there, and we still work with them as part of the CPP programme, was that there was a real sense of how the professional, amateur and volunteer worked together, and each recognised the value that each other's contributed. So the club belonged and still belongs to the people. I suppose that same spirit of collective efforts and shared ownership, I think, is a real feature of this work. And yet, curiously, in the art world, which is so full of complex ideas, we often struggle to articulate what it is that we actually mean by community and community decision-making and engagement. We probably could spend the whole day and many more days just defining the term community and what we mean by that. I'm sure when you all close your eyes and you hear the word community, an image pops into your mind. But to zoom out, I think what we're talking about here is society at large, whilst also recognising the inequalities that operate in society at large. So this work in its many different forms holds incredible power, not just to create art that can stop you in your tracks, but to build spaces where we can be together, where individual knowledge and experience can be recognised and valued, and we can form new ways of thinking and working together, which I would argue is even more essential at the moment when the very act of being together in difference is so deeply challenging. I often like to think of it as barn raising, so just go with this analogy for 1 second. So if we decided on this panel to build a barn together, the first thing we might ask ourselves is, do I want to be part of making that barn? If I said yes, then we'd think about, well, what does the barn look like? What should it do? Who is it for? Who has the skills that we need? How do we share the labour? Who else needs to be involved? We'd make decisions together, we'd draw on different experiences we have, and we'd navigate challenges, resources, permissions, conflicts on site, unexpected obstacles, personal challenges, trade wars, all these different things that we would have to factor into the building of this barn. And we'd probably spend a lot more time on the foundations than the actual building itself, because we know that without the foundations, it will collapse at the first sign of stress. And that might be frustrating to us, because to the outside world, it might look like not much is happening, but we know that those foundations are essential. And then when we build it, we'll think about who gets to use it. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. And then we'll have conversations about how we actually tell the story of this collective mission and shared purpose that we undertook, and how we tell the story of the making of it. And then somewhere along the line, someone will get to place a value on that, and that will be a whole other set of conversations. So the work we do isn't a straight line. It's about making space for what is possible, or for what is maybe not yet understood. It can sometimes acknowledge the limitations of the structures that shape our world. It can create moments of mini revolution. It can be a release of challenge, grief, joy, healing, transformation. Willie Russell, I think, from Knowsley said it best when it's about telling stories that matter. And I would argue that this space has become a real space of leadership, and I think policies like Let's Create, and it was really reassuring to hear Darren re-emphasise that this morning, have started to open up the art world, but there's obviously still a lot of work to be done. But as the world around us is shifting, either by design or default, I think it's important for us to remember that the history of this work, the shoulders that we stand on, is that this field of practice stands alongside social movements, civil rights, anti-racism, class, labour and housing struggles, feminist and disability justice, climate justice, queer politics. This is the history of this practice. This is where its power is, because it walks hand in hand with the challenges of our time. And I think we in this room and others outside have a responsibility to continue to try and find ways to support this diverse range of work by artists and communities, because it really informs and can help create a different type of tomorrow for us all to exist and coexist within. So now we're going to get to hear about some of those rich forms of practice. Our first speaker is Sophie. Sophie, do you want to head to the lectern?
Thank you very much, Patrick. So I'm Sophie Eustace. I'm co-director of Creative Playground Crawley. And Creative Playground is part of the Creative People and Places programme, which, as you all know, is aiming to bring arts and culture to areas that are least engaged and enabling local people to decide the cultural offer that's on in their area, ultimately to make people's lives better. And we're one of 38 projects around the country, and it's wonderful to see CPP colleagues here in the room with me. Just a quick bit of context. For those of you who've never heard of Crawley, it's a new town halfway between London and Brighton in the southeast. It has a hugely diverse population of just over 118,000 people. They live across these 14 neighbourhoods. It's next to Gatwick Airport. It was hit incredibly hard during the pandemic, and 60% of households score highly on the index of multiple deprivation, and it has some of the lowest cultural engagement in the southeast. A quick fun fact, The Cure and Gareth Southgate are from Crawley. So we're fairly new. We only launched in May 23, but since then we've engaged in just over 19,000 people across 300 projects. We've been very busy, and hundreds of thousands of people have engaged in the murals that we've commissioned across the town. But before any of this started, we worked with a large group of local people to create a theory of change to underpin the programme. People told us that they wanted Crawley to become more vibrant, for people to feel invigorated there and connected with others, and for everyone to have access to bold cultural projects that could make people feel proud of their town. It wouldn't be called Creepy Crawley anymore, it would just be Crawley. Together we came up with 5 values: boundlessness, opportunity, inclusivity, pride of place, and joyful togetherness. And it's against these values that all the programming choices are made by local people and that we measure their impact. So those local people who steer the programme are called playmakers. We use regular fun events like programming parties, playmaker feasts to bring all sorts of people from across generations and backgrounds together. I'm sure many of you do this. We share food, listen to music, have gentle creative activities that we can trial different approaches, and then we can shape the programme by listening carefully to what people are telling us. Play is critical in our approach. Play offers people of any age the chance to experiment, to self-direct, to feel enjoyment from the very process of playing together, to use their imaginations, to dream up big ideas. It's a mechanism that enables our community to make their opinions heard. So we play party games at our programming parties, such as an enormous game of Pass the Parcel. In each wrapper is a provocation about the town or an idea of what we might do, so everyone discusses that together. We've hosted very messy community painting parties during our mural installations. We've also created the Book of Crawley, which is an alternative guidebook written and edited entirely by 9 to 10-year-olds, which is a wild read, I can tell you. These have all worked as playful ways to break down the barriers to participation and to empower local people who we're getting to know to build that trust so that they can truly lead the programme. So last year, people told us they wanted the green outdoor spaces in Crawley animated, including Tilgate Park, which, as you can see from the slides, has a beautiful lake. The Playmakers chose to present internationally renowned artist Luke Gerrans' piece, Crossings, as part of a festival they called Around the Lake. This is a sound installation experienced on rowing boats where people are free to explore the water while listening to a series of personal stories on migration and journeying. One of our playmakers was commissioned to tell her story about crossing continents to settle in Crawley as a young Muslim woman, and that became one of the audio pieces that you could choose from. 350 people experienced crossings. Many Crawley people had never been on the water in Tilgate before, and I'm relieved to say not a single person fell in. In response to the quest for hands-on, unusual experiences, we're currently presenting Play, Interact, Explore by Leap Then Look. This is a participatory sculptural experience in our temporary venue that we've just opened in the County Mall Shopping Centre. Everyone is invited in to transform the space through playing with the tactile sculptures, taking photographs, playing with the projections, moving things around, rocking, rolling, stacking, even wearing some of the elements in this fun, interactive exhibition. The artists work with a group of adults with learning disabilities to develop a bespoke new element of the installation, again, sort of embedding the piece in our local community. And now school groups, local businesses, other community groups, anyone just passing the shop unit on the way to Primark opposite, they're all coming in to experience it. And through the universal possibilities of play, we're welcoming these people of all backgrounds interact, and we're offering a surprising way to interact with contemporary art. Our community-led fashion show in April is focusing on playing with materials and different making techniques. Again, our playmakers are leading the curation and format of this celebratory event. Alongside the development of the show, workshops are taking place with members of our Chagosian community. This is one of the most marginalised community groups of people resettled here from the Chagos Islands. And it's taken us 2 years to build the trust of community leaders there. But we're collaborating with a Mauritian artist to run the workshops, and it's a phenomenal success. We're making garments to showcase in the shop window to celebrate the stories of some of the seldom heard in our town. And finally, Come With Us is a strand of the programme that invites playmakers to visit high-quality events further afield in Brighton, Sussex or London to raise aspirations and inspire what happens back in our town. In preparation for the fashion show, trips have included Unravel, the power and politics of textiles and art at the Barbican, Hatain Patel's Come As You Really Are, the Hobby Cave in an old department store in Croydon, and Vogue, Inventing the Runway, an immersive installation at the Lightbox in London. These are vital touch points, exploring the themes of fashion and textiles, quality works that demonstrate to locals what is possible. And playmakers are developing a critical language around quality, which is helping them make informed decisions and demand work that is of rigour and integrity, with the potential to inspire and challenge people in Crawley. We're just at the beginning of the journey. There's a lot more to do, but we're planning on using play in the true spirit of our name to catalyse and inspire our town to become a creative playground for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So much amazing work in such a short space of time already. It's brilliant, and maybe we'll return to some of those themes around the kind of listening and building trust, but on the concept of play. But Sara, over to you now for the next presentation.
Thanks very much. I'm Sara Wajid. I'm one of the 2 co-CEOs of Birmingham Museums Trust, and I'd like to talk to you about the Citizens Jury. I have 7 minutes, and 3 minutes of those is going to be a short film, which I hope will play. Oh no, all of the slides that I wanted to hide are not hidden. So you're now going to get lots of non-hidden, non-slides that I wanted to. Maybe this is the film. Is this a film? Will it play?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Think Tank and the official launch event for the Birmingham Museum Citizens Jury Recommendations, what we've all worked so hard to put together.
It's nice to be on the jury. It's normally the other way round. That was a joke.
I initially joined because it was a chance for me to come out of my comfort zone and be more involved in the city that I live in.
As a young adult, it's all too easy to feel powerless in the world of today, to feel that decision-making of any weight is a far-off thing for the likes of me. So to have the chance to work for real, genuine social change placed right in my hands in the city I call home is an opportunity I will treasure.
Inclusivity goes beyond access. It's about fostering a sense of belonging.
Our museums should be spaces for diverse experiences. They should engage and inspire on a wide range of topics. And finally, they must help us to build a more positive future. Thank you.
During the sessions, we also had an incredible film and photography crew, and they put together this fabulous documentary film, which we've already seen, and we're so excited to show you. So please enjoy.
I'm proud. It's a lot of responsibility, but I'm happy that I've been part of this process.
I feel more involved. I feel as if I'm part of Birmingham now. And it's taken me all this time to feel part of Birmingham. So for that, thanks.
A lot of the recommendations you made were about young people. How do you capture their interest?
We're all here today, Arts Council, National Lottery, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and we're going through, I suppose, a similar process to the museum. We're here to listen and to learn.
So I can write down on my action sheet museum.
You absolutely can. That conversation's ongoing.
In all seriousness, our commitment is there because if we wanted to listen to random people and not do something, I could just look at our Google reviews and not do that. So it is a genuine thing, when we say that we wanted to hear what people had to say and then action it.
When you read through these recommendations, they are our words. No one has put these words into our mouths. We came together as complete strangers, and through this process, we have produced this document that is entirely ours, the citizens of Birmingham. And we are so proud of every single word that you will read in there.
So this process has been the first time in the UK that a citizens' jury has been run for a museum. And I don't recognise hardly anybody in this room, and normally I only talk to museum people, or only museum people want to hear from me. So that might not seem like that interesting to you if you're not in the museum sector, that it's the first citizens' jury for a museum. But I underline that because civic museums like Birmingham museums, they make no sense if they are unmoored from their people and their place. They were literally invented to do that. So when they become unrepresentative, as many museums have in terms of their audience, they don't function. They don't function as a democratic sort of principle, as an arts organisation. That's how they're meant to work. So why we organised this jury was because we have a crisis in Birmingham museums and we needed help urgently. We've got 1 million objects. We're one of the largest, we are the largest museums trust in the UK. We used to have 1 million visitors before the pandemic, and then there was austerity. The city council went bust and declared itself essentially bankrupt. We now have the lowest engagement in the West Midlands, in museums in the West Midlands out of everywhere in England, despite being the largest museums trust. And most of our venues are closed to the public, nine venues, 1 million objects, 1 million visitors. So that's the crisis. And I came into post in 2020, and I realised quite quickly that this wasn't going to be so much a question of managed decline as having your foot on the brake of an inevitable car crash. So on the one hand, this terrible kind of financial crisis, the worst one since probably the invention of the Birmingham Museum's art gallery in 1885. But on the other hand, this phenomenal cultural asset in a phenomenal city, huge excitement for the possibility. And we brought with us, Zach and I, a vision for making the museum a symbol of hope, social trust and belonging. And so this was, on one hand, the most ambitious transformation project since the organisation came into existence, but also the worst financial crisis that it had experienced. So in 2022, we reopened the Museum and Art Gallery, which is the flagship of the 9 venues where most of those 1 million visitors would go in an annual year. And it had been closed due to electrical rewiring since kind of during the pandemic. And then, people were getting their beloved museum back, but only a fraction of it because we had a bit of money from the Commonwealth Games, and only for a few months. And there we trialled a very different approach to the displays. We were really doing a big turn towards making it much more relevant. And some people loved it and some people didn't. On the whole, we found that younger people of colour really, really enjoyed it. But we were then embarking on a recovery plan, a big business plan, which we began last year. But we knew that market research would not cut it, would not reach the parts that we needed to reach, because market research is not enough. And so, particularly in Birmingham, where it's almost 50% global majority people and the youngest citizenry in any city in Europe, we knew that those old paradigms of core traditional visitors and then audience development, that sort of incremental, slow thing that hasn't worked for anybody, frankly, in the last 30 years, would definitely not work in Birmingham. And so that the very nature of the city demanded that we needed relevance now, not just to survive, but, to be meaningful. And so to do that, we knew from things like a study by Melissa Strauss that community engagement in arts organisations often doesn't touch the core, and certainly doesn't make strategic decision-making, doesn't reach strategic decision-making or change the core model. And so doing a big fat business plan without any community engagement, or without a particularly kind of turbo-boosted version of that, which would underpin the business plan, would just be handing over stuff to a bunch of economists who would give us numbers who wouldn't really solve our problem. So as decades have not given us that shift in closing the cultural participation gap, we needed the wisdom and mandate from the people of Birmingham. And so that's why we put this question to them. What does Birmingham need and want from its museums now and in the future? And what should Birmingham Museums Trust do these things happen? So 30 strangers came together. I won't go into the how, you can read about that in the report, but citizens' juries have a very kind of tight methodology called sortition, which makes sure that those 30 people are demographically representative of the city. They're like a mini demos. And over the course of 6 days, they were giving expert witnesses a lot of time and support and facilitated deliberation to consider this question in depth. And we were shit scared, to be honest, because we had a mission, we had a vision. I'd been working on it for years, and we'd had this sort of divided reaction to the offer that we'd done, and we were pinning everything on this because the whole business plan has to tie to this. So if they had come back and said, they could have come back and said, 1, we hate your vision, 2, we want this, or worse, it could have been a horrible divisive bun fight. We'd just come through the culture wars, we'd had race riots last summer, we keep being told that democracy is dead and weak, and that we have we have a society that is falling apart at the seams and all the rest of it. So anything could have happened, and then we would have essentially had to act on it, because you're contracted when you do a jury. It's not like market research. You can't take it or leave it. You have to sign up to it. And everybody was looking because, as I said, this was the first thing in the museum sector. So I'm not going to go into this now because I haven't got time, but they heard from all these different commentators. And the bit that I want to get to next is what they came out with at the end, which was their statement and a series of incredibly powerful recommendations. I'm going to read this out, and I might cry because I haven't spoken about this in public. I've never read this statement out and not managed to cry. So if I don't cry at the end of it, give me a cheer. At the beginning of this process, we didn't know what to expect. Many of us haven't been to a museum in a long time. We didn't know what Birmingham Museums Trust was about and what it could mean to us. We were not engaged and did not feel close to our museums. As a result of the process, we feel more pride in our museums and the city. We heard a range of perspectives speaking on diverse topics that relate to how the industry works. And as a group of different people with different lives, we have different opinions, but we have found consensus in our shared aspiration for Birmingham Museums Trust to thrive. We feel more connected to our museums and hopeful for their future. We have enjoyed being part of this decision-making process, and it has made us advocate for and promote our museums in our own communities. Our museums need to update how they are perceived in Birmingham and on a national stage. The reopened Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery is much more appealing. Whew. We hope to see this continued across the other sites, and that the Trust makes sure the people are aware of the amazing things it has to offer and the process it has gone through. Here's the cryy bit. We acknowledge our museums are fighting for their survival. They must take risks in their bid to be inspiring, educating, engaging to all. It is important for our museums to involve and represent the communities they are responsible to, i.e. the people of Birmingham. and they shouldn't be precious about doing so. We deserve museums that are proud of us, that we can be proud of, that celebrate what's unique about Birmingham. The voice of the museum is to some extent the voice of the people, and we want everyone to hear us a mile coming. Thank you. Yes, very good. Thank you. So, it literally says on my little sheet here, don't cry. So I didn't cry. So the recommendations, which are important, there's lots of really interesting recommendations, and you can read about them in the report, but I particularly wanted to pick out these key points. They wanted us to attract more young people with lower educational levels and working class people. And then they wanted this. They wanted us to engage on divisive topics and present multiple perspectives of history in a way that encourages critical engagement. I might have done something wrong with the slide there. Critical engagement. And these 2 points are really important because a lot of people have been, run through the culture wars. I'm the first Asian director of a major museum in the UK. I share the job with a black man. He's one of the very few black men leading a museum anywhere in the country. And to have come through the culture wars, and then be in that position and then be putting out our stall for something much more progressive, much more committed to social justice, it kind of leaves us quite vulnerable as leaders, and also sometimes quite fearful. So to get this resounding thing back from the people of Birmingham was also healing for us in the museum, and empowered us and boosted our morale. But more importantly, it made us realise. I'll talk about this another time at another conference. But it also made us realise. I'm looking for the person who's holding up the 1 minute. Is it 1 minute? Got it. All right. All finished now? Had 1 minute. Okay, the end. I'll talk about culture and democracy at the panels. Okay, thanks a lot.
Hello, everyone. Yes, that is me. I am here to talk about the Children's Capital of Culture, because if you didn't know, Rotherham is officially the world's first Children's Capital of Culture. It is very, very exciting. If you don't know, it is basically a year-long celebration of creativity, culture and community in Rotherham. And what makes this different is Rotherham didn't bid for it, we weren't awarded it. It is actually an idea that came from young people in Rotherham back at 2017. So young people have been at the heart of this ever since the beginning. Now, I was born from Rotherham. I'm born and bred in Rotherham. And, it has been a tough place to grow up. It has been dragged through the mud. But the misconception about the Children's Capital of Culture is that it's not trying to brush over any events. If anything, it's a demonstration in response to Rotherham's commitment to empowering young people, keeping us safe and listening to us. As young people, we're getting the opportunity to change the narrative and reshape the future of our town, because it's heritage what got us here, but ultimately culture is what moves us forward, and the Children's Capital of Culture is giving us the chance to create a better future for Rotherham. I'm very proud to be from here, and I first got involved as a young artist in residence as a presenter, and I've had loads of amazing work experience opportunities. However, seeing Rotherham develop and working within the town has actually unleashed my passion for community work, like coming to things like this and seeing how inspiring it is to develop a town that really matters to me, that I really care about, which is why I'm really excited to be involved as one of the young voices shaping the programme as part of the youth programming panel. Now, in a nutshell, this is like Funky Dragon's Den. We basically, any event that you see put on in Rotherham, anything, you can bet it has been through the youth programming panel first. Events are pitched to us. We even co-produce the event application form. So anything that comes, we are at the heart of the decision making. And what makes it quite different, what we're doing in Rotherham, is there is no artistic director. It is very democratic. And the key decision makers are us as the youth programming panel and Rotherham's Cultural Partnership Board, which is made up of freelancers and funders from creative and private sectors, all in Rotherham. Now, these are some of the events we've been involved with, and key things we look for as the panel, as young people, is, well, first off, our version of culture is very broad. Because the beauty of doing a 365-day festival is you really can cater to everyone in Rotherham in that time. Like, I really believe we've got the platform to do that. And another thing that makes it so exciting on our panel is we are such a diverse group in terms of ages, experiences, ethnicities, SENDs, faith. And for us, the main thing that we just nail to the ground is young people have to be at the centre of it. They're not for young people, they're planned by young people as well, with their delivering sessions on the day. And this is an example I wanted to speak about of co-production in its absolute finest, which is the Root Street Carnival, one of my favourite events we do at the Children's Capital of Culture. Now, an issue that young people in Rotherham, but globally, are extremely passionate about is the environment, is the climate crisis. So it felt so fitting for the Children's Capital of Culture to have an event all about that. And of course, we had to make it into a carnival because that's just fun and vibes. And you can't be the Children's Capital of Culture without a big party. And we wanted to celebrate the green spaces in Rotherham because they're amazing. So that's what this event was all about. And we did this in collaboration with Emergency Exit Arts, who you might be familiar with, an amazing organisation. That was the host puppet Root. She was called Rain. And we named her, we designed her. I actually was one of the young artists who helped build her. Them hands, I painted them. That was my big contribution. So we really were involved. And as well, what I want to emphasise, it's not a set group of like 10 young people who are getting to do this. Like, we've just welcomed some new members onto the panel last week. To get on the panel, it was literally an open call. Any young person in Rotherham can be on it. And it's just all about engaging as many young people from across all the 25 boroughs as we possibly can. Now, it's so important for us that young people have that sense of belonging and pride, especially in our events, because we found that's when people are most likely to attend. In pretty much every primary school in Rotherham now, there's been engagement, and in secondary schools. And them banners that we make, if a 7-year-old comes to school and they add a sticker onto the banner, you can bet they will bring their nan, gran, uncle, dad, all their friends to come and watch them. And it's giving people this sense of belonging in our town, which is amazing. It really is starting to feel like, you know, this is our town. And you see people come and they're so excited to see their contributions, which is absolutely amazing. That is me. That is my very brief insight into the Children's Capital of Culture and our decision-making as young people. It really is the most exciting time to be in Rotherham, so you should come and pay it a visit. Yay! Now, if you can't tell, I literally really could just talk about this all day because I'm so passionate about it. So if you want to hear anything else, you know, it's lunch, let's have a chat. Thank you all so much for listening. Big up Rotherham. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And Saad, it's over to you. You've got 7 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Well, first, how do you follow that? I mean, 7 minutes. Let's do it. Great. Here we go. Well, time. It's been a big word for today. Time, the only resource we all need. We never have enough for what we require. The only thing we cannot fundraise for, we cannot stop, we cannot rewind. And I know I'm speaking to a room full of allies, but we're also speaking to the world through those lenses. And time gives us 2 choices. One is to be radical in our thinking, radical in that direction we want to take, and radical in the actual inaction, that the same recipe, the same way, is going to give different outcomes. Or we can be practical, step back, be critical, and understand that the sector is going through a crisis and we need a different way. But what happens when we are radically inactive? Well, we have seen that through the last decade. As a cultural sector, it's not a secret that we are going through a big crisis of resources and of engagement. 18% reduction of core funding decline from 2009 to 2023. We all feel it, and we all live through it. 14% drop in audience engagement between 2021 and 2023, especially after COVID. We grappled to bring people back to engage with us. And 30% reduction, that's what regional museums have told us in terms of their funding from local authorities. And we know that local authorities are going through crisis, but all of us are not just cultural workers. We're also citizens. And the state of the world really matters to us. And we have seen it again, and we've lived through it in the last decade. Brexit deadlock. We know we're going through complex questions. I personally don't know if Brexit is good or bad, but I know that the complexity of questions we're facing is growing day after day. We've been grappling with conversations around climate change, and we've seen inaction, and most of it is due to bureaucratic failures. Most of it is due because we are trying to get different outcomes, but going through the same system, looking at leadership, looking at decision-making in the same way we've always been doing. And then trust is lacking now. Electoral participation declined. UK voters' turnout fell to 59% in the last year. Some of the people who have lost that trust are in this room. Some are watching us. I'm definitely one of them. Because we know that our voices, when even they are heard, they're not being delivered. But is that the only way? It is not. So let's look at how others are approaching decision-making. And let's look at how others are delivering within that complexity. Brought in three opposite examples here. We look at Ireland. At the opposite of Brexit, they had a very complex question around what they do with abortion. And that, I would argue, is a more divisive question than the one we had to face around Brexit. But they knew, and they trusted by bringing a national citizen assembly that represents the nation, could take them forward in that conversation, and it did. And they had social reforms that was voted and supported by all the nation. We look at our neighbors in France, in Paris. They've brought in the citizen assembly to deal with questions around environment. And we know that now on the global stage, they are leading in terms of that conversation. Then we go to Thailand. They've brought in students and citizens, empowered them, and that trust in the system is growing by the day with its engagement. They're not the only ones. The movement is growing all over the world. NAE 4 years ago have been going through the same crisis, and for the first time in our life, closing the door was actually a possibility that we could see. But instead of being radically inactive, we've changed the way, handed over the keys to our citizens. Programming decisions in the last 3 years, more than 250,000 have been decided by our citizens. In fact, we don't decide anymore what we put in our program. Strategic leadership, we became the first institution in the world to put a permanent citizen assembly as part of its leadership remit, meaning they shape the strategy and the business plan. They are even leading the design and infrastructure and the capital work that is happening. When we've done this, and I have to say a huge thank you to Let's Create and to the Trust of Art Council, because if that wasn't there, our idea and business plan was received as something of inexperience, something of a bit of naivety. But we know we're not the only ones who are going through this road, and we've heard from amazing panelists today. But what happens when you do this? In 3 years, as the sector is grappling, NAE have seen its biggest growth period ever. We've quadrupled our financial reserves. We've increased by 50% our core funding, and our engagement have grown by 16%. And someone was saying earlier, if you bring in a menu that is cooked by the people, then they will bring more guests to eat it. And that's what we are seeing. We're not capitalizing on our network, but now it's about the network of our network. So time is running. My time is definitely running on this stage. But I know that the movement is growing from the Galleon Art Centre in Barking and its quiet transformation to the west of England coming to rewrite their cultural strategy. There are dozens of organizations that are coming on board. We, as NAE, and many in this room and many of our panelists have made our choice, and today the choice is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you to each of our speakers there. I mean, you know, one of the things that really strikes me, and I'm just scrolling through some of the comments coming through from the audience there, is how obvious some of this is. You know, it's like, oh, how about we involve more people? Okay, you know, and then the results follow. I mean, it's interesting that there's a disconnect there, I think, between some of the structures of power and actually the practice that's happening. Is there experience, particularly within a museum context? I imagine there was a lot of stakeholder engagement for you to be able to open up those structures, or how was it?
Is this working?
I think it's working.
Yeah,
is it working?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in a museum context, the charity governance structure is what we're used to, and probably a lot of other arts organisations, you know, have that model. And you know, it's a 19th century, it's a Victorian, you know, structure, and increasingly it doesn't work in. And not that, no disrespect to our board of trustees, but it doesn't seem to work very well just across the board in terms of being representative, in terms of being flight of foot, in terms of just sort of lived experience, and also just in terms of, you know, how Saad was describing what they've been doing at New Art Exchange, that kind of blurring between executive, board, community, through a citizens' assembly. It's just, you just need more. You know, you need an abundance of wisdom. You need a sort of strong mandate. You need a foundation, to your barn analogy. And, you know, 12 or 13 people on a board of governors in a sort of precarious financial period like this, that's a lot as well to ask them to hold financially. That's a lot of risk in Birmingham in a context where there's a bankrupt council. It's sort of not fair to anybody, and it's not the best way of doing things. So I think we're also, you know, the next thing I anticipate is a sort of, you know, poking around with that governance structure in light of what we've learned from the citizens' jury. And I don't know what that next stage will look like, but that's what's in our minds.
I suppose there's a question about expectation coming through as well. I suppose is you know, there are parameters that we exist in the world. I'm thinking from your perspective, Grace, you know, there's so much potential to do so much across the Children's Capital of Culture programme. How do you contain some of the enthusiasm for people that maybe have all these different ideas that might be difficult to make happen? Or
I think that it's just such a dynamic process what we've come up with. You just kind of go with it and see what happens, see what works. Because, you know, it's not something that like, woohoo, it's just great all the time. Like, obviously there are hoops, and I think it's just about being really reactive. You know, we don't have a lot of like, on the panel, it's not one of them things where we've got step by step, do everything the same. It is very much week by week, we'll meet with people about events. Sometimes we're not feeling it, but there's summer, and then we'll reevaluate. Whereas I just think it's one of them things where you've just got to be very reactive, and no two situations are the same. Even when you're putting on events in Rotherham, they're just not the same. And I think about just treating everything individually and just taking it as it comes.
Brilliant. And Saad, there's a question here about this brilliant work needs to be brought to the attention of all local and national government leaders, policymakers. We know it works, do they? I suppose, is there anything you'd like to speak to that in terms of the amplification of this as a philosophy? Because I think, you know, we're probably a church of the converted in here. It's like, how do we spread that?
Well, I think, and this is why I wanted to kind of showcase some data. We all, whatever political views we hold, I think we can all close our eyes and dream about the same future. It's a future of growth, of prosperity, and of opportunity. And this is why I was speaking about radical inaction, because I disagree about radical systemic shift. The systemic shift is just a systemic shift. that is needed. If we have a comprehensive conversation about the fact that we do need and we strive for growth, then I would just invite interrogations and communication with us. I know that the movement is growing. I know when I've showcased the case study of NAE, NAE is one in so many who are delivering the same. And obviously with these conferences, we're hoping that that voice is just going to be magnified. We can speak in conferences like this about why we do it, when it is needed, and what it delivers. But we know that the how needs a longer conversation. And I can confidently say that the cultural sector is building a real expertise and knows how to deliver, and it's there. And I know we're all open to have more conversations with key stakeholders.
There's a question here actually on that subject of expertise, and maybe we could ask each of you just to respond to this, maybe starting with you, Sophie, if that's okay. But it was around just the facilitation of this work, and there being something different here, and I think you talked about that practice of listening and building trust, and that being slightly different to being an artist or a youth worker or a teacher. What opportunities to hone these skills would the panel wish exists?
Well, projects like CPP, the fact that they're long-term, that's the critical, that you have the time to build the trust, that we spent the whole of the first 12 months just listening because the demand on the programmes, people had ideas coming, we took our time to really sift, to work with people, to ensure that we were paying for people's time, that we were looking after them, that we were building that trust. So I think, the opportunity to be in a place-based project like ours, long-term, that's got to be absolutely essential in terms of winning that trust and making informed decisions.
Any other responses to that idea of the skills required to be able to deliver some of this work, or any training wishes that you wished were out there in the world?
I mean, just because I'm holding this, I can say some words, but somebody else would like to go first. Okay. I mean, we worked with this company, Shared Futures, who are a specialist citizens jury. They're activists, they're very skilled, highly skilled facilitators. And I think I come from a community engagement and programming background in the museum field. And, I guess we thought we had good practice. We generally, in Birmingham, we're sort of considered like a museum that is more steeped in community engagement than some museums. But when I saw their level of facilitation, I think we were all sort of like, no, there's a next level. There's a next level of seriousness around democratic deliberation that requires deep listening, humanity, a sort of fun, playfulness, but a way of making people feel like they will be seriously heard and building that trust. We were working with them on it, but they didn't want too many people in the room, and I could see why, because most of the people who came together to form the jury were asked on the first session, where do you feel that the museum's stories and objects, how relevant are they to you, stand on this line? And about 80% of that group of people stood on the far no, not at all, and only 20% stood on the sort of maybe and quite relevant. So then if you had a load of kind of more than converted museum people in there, we'd be trying to influence and shape, and so the methodology was very rigorous. And I think in terms of your point to skills, I think we've got a lot to learn from Shared Futures. And, obviously we're very interested in the Citizens Empower Network that, Saad has established, and we're part of that Citizens Empower Network. So we hope to learn from others.
I think when working with the community, I started working with Children's Capital of Culture as a young person, and it can be quite daunting as a member of the community, and you can be a bit sceptical about it and what's going to happen. So I think that from a facilitator point of view, it's just about making it a comfortable thing and just making it easy. Like, I know it's tempting to just send a really huge formal email, but people just don't want that, just like nice biscuits. Like on the youth programming panel, we honestly didn't do anything really that significant for about 2 months. We basically used to just meet up, talk, eat, and it's those like slow processes that I feel like really then make things successful. I think you do have to be in it for the long game sometimes, and it's just really nice to build them relationships, make you feel more comfortable with other people. We still just do a lot of fun stuff, and I think that's what it's all about, just making people feel relaxed, just making it a kind, and ultimately that's when you get the best reactions, I think.
Oh, thank you. So we've got about 3 minutes, I think, now. Is there any questions from the floor? Because I think Mentimeter slowed up a little bit, but is anything from the floor, old school? Any questions out there? I can't really see. One of the things that again, it's on the online portal here, was just around the analysis, I guess, and evidence base. There's a question there around the way that we kind of, I suppose, storytell the impact of this work. Is there any kind of comments on that in terms of what evaluative structures we use to be able to talk about this so that it can be spread? Are we missing a trick here? Are we overthinking things? It's because the data is very compelling, isn't it? So is there something beyond the data that we need to be thinking about?
Well, I don't know the answer to this question. But I know beyond the evaluation that we read on paper, the real stories are on the ground. The impact is happening on the ground, and it comes to that time and to that growth. And maybe it's just understanding that as a sector, our pace is not the pace of people, and that change happens on long term. And we are doing our best to bring that data to the conversation. We're doing our best to work with our council, with colleagues at DCMS, with policymakers. We're open to all parties. We're open to all people. But the reality is change is happening on the ground, and we're seeing some fantastic stories. So the film that was brought earlier by Sara, to me, that's what we need to kind of amplify. And we need the help of everyone. We have the stories, we have the data. And together we can bring that in front of the key people.
I have a question. When you did your citizen engagements, when you found opponents to the process, did you find that the advocates for involvement were among the citizens you worked with or the professionals you engaged with?
I'm not sure. Is that me or Sara?
Yeah, I think it's probably specific to the citizen assembly model there. A question about, I suppose, about if there's challenge in the space, how does that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for people who were more resistant to it, there was quite a lot of skepticism from people. Understandable skepticism, to be fair, from like museum practitioners, maybe people on our board, concern about how will you keep it clean, how will it be really demographically representative, how will you kind of basically soft lefties not poison their thing with all of your, like, knowing that the creative industries are predominantly staffed by quite similar people with quite similar, social attitudes and political views. So there was quite a lot of concern about that. And then when the outcomes and the recommendations came out, it was really important that we had an oversight group who had been overseeing the process, and that included some quite fierce people like the Vice Chancellor of Birmingham City University and, people very steeped in politics and political processes, to have made sure that the process was rigorous, so that when the recommendations came out, that those sceptical people couldn't say, I don't trust your process. But the citizens themselves were not, their only scepticism was, will you listen? Will you implement these recommendations?
Can I just add a point maybe?
Very quickly.
It's just also like a lot of this skepticism comes from the fact that we all are used to debate versus deliberation. Someone came in, asked us, do you want Brexit or no? It's a binary question. It will divide us forever. Versus someone coming in and saying, what relationship do you want with Europe? And instead of a debate where one wins and one loses, we're having a deliberation that takes its time, build consensus, exactly what Ireland have done, and that's exactly what we're doing. And this is why we are able to bring citizens that have absolutely completely different lived experiences, views about the world, even understanding of a museum, of what NAE, of what any of the cultural sector should do. But they do build consensus, because at the end of the day, we all share the same vision about tomorrow. And it's a tomorrow of growth, potential, opportunity for us, for the next generation. So that's the communality that deliberation is bringing in. And if I had to give a call for action of what the sector needs, is more support, more investment to train us in navigating through that complexity, through the art of deliberation and the art of asking questions that will push us forward and push the conversation forward.
Great, thank you. Right, we're going to wrap up. I think I can see Rebecca waiting in the wings there to tell us about lunch, which I'm sure everyone's like. But just if you could join me in thanking our panel, Sophie, Sara, Grace and Saad. Thank you so much.